Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I'm one of your co-hosts, Sami Kinnison, here with Angela Belford. We are back together again. We've had a couple weeks where we did some solo podcasting, then we had a guest. We are here in the same virtual room once again, here to talk to you guys about incomplete emotional cycles. So, real super fun and lighthearted episode for sure.
Dun, dun, dun.
Right. So, Angela, I think that incomplete emotional cycles is really kind of a big key within a lot of the traveling light sort of framework and philosophy. Tell us a little bit about what an incomplete cycle is, if somebody's like, well, I don't even know what this means, and what it might look like.
Yeah, so I love metaphors and illustrations. And so if you can imagine that you are driving down the road and somebody swerves in front of you and you have to slam on your brakes, then you get scared. That's the trigger, right? And so your body does the activation into fight, flight, or freeze. And in this case, I guess it would be fight because you slam on the brakes, which is, if you freeze up and you don't know what to do, that could be a different response when this happens. And then let's say that you avoid the danger and then you like take a deep breath and you're like, whew, okay. And you can notice that when that car swerved in front of you, the activation felt like adrenaline racing through your body. You don't know, but your cortisol also triggered, your eyes dilated, which helped you to be able to see the danger better, and your respiration changed. So your breathing changed. So literally at that moment, your body, without you even needing to tell it, said, okay, we do not need to be digesting food. We do not need to anything that is not required. We are going to take it offline right now. If you had a cut on your finger that your body was sending, blood cells to heal it, it paused all of that. So it's that state of everything being calm is called, that homeostasis state is the rest and digest. And that goes offline when you hit fight or flight, because your body needs all of its resources and all of its energy to take care of the threat that is in front of you. But then as soon as the threat is either gone or your body figures out that it wasn't actually a threat, one of the examples I recently used is like if you're walking along the path and you see a thin black object laying in the path and you jump back and you think it's a snake, then once your body comes online and sees that it's just a stick, that's another way that like the threat can pass, is your thinking brain says, no, that's not a threat. You actually are okay. So that moment, and we've all had that moment where either the car accident or you think you're going to step on a snake, and then you like probably feel yourself take a deep breath and be like, okay, you may even like literally, do you see that I grab my chest when I, okay, I'm okay. And that moment when you begin to tell yourself you're okay, that is the completion of the cycle, and it is a return to homeostasis. So that first trigger, when you thought you were in danger or you were in danger, that's the trigger. And then you have a response, which is slam on the brakes, jump back from the snake. And then you have a return to homeostasis. And that's the completion of the cycle, is when you like all of the, the adrenaline starts to bleed off. The cortisol should go back to normal. Your breathing returns to normal. Your body goes back to digesting food and sending all of the nutrients to heal. All of those things. You complete that cycle. Here's the challenge, is that most of us spend a good chunk of our day in that activation threat. And we don't necessarily, as in the case of a car accident or the snake, we take that breath and we return to the homeostasis. A lot of times we don't, our life is going so fast, we don't make ourselves trigger that return to homeostasis, because the next threat comes back faster than we can even get back to rest and digest. So if you stop
some
at the top,
of the threats, I think, in our life might be ongoing. So I've got a boss who yells at me and gets me in this activated state. when I'm at work, it doesn't necessarily help me to go back to rest and digest. I need to
Correct.
stay at the ready. I need to be available to jump in whichever direction and to fight, flight, freeze, run away, fawn, all of the things at a moment's notice. A lot of us live our lives that way, or some of us do, and that thread is not as simple as a thin line in the
That's right.
sidewalk that you realize is not actually a snake. It is something that can feel more
Ongoing.
ongoing.
Correct. And I would say that the incomplete cycles we are primarily talking about in this book, like getting yourself back to homeostasis on a daily basis, is kind of actually later in the book. The incomplete cycles that we're talking about, but it's easier to explain it like in the now. When we are little kids or when we've had past trauma, then oftentimes when we get to that activation, it may want to bleed off the emotions. We may want to cry. I don't know if you've gotten so angry you just want to cry, or you've gotten so upset you want to cry. But if you were told often as a child, quit crying or I'll give you something to cry about, then you get to the top of that activation and the response, and then we bury that response, right? Because the response doesn't feel safe. So here we didn't feel safe with what happened, and then response doesn't feel safe. That fight, flight, or freeze doesn't feel safe, so we bury it. And what I propose in the book is that this has created toxic waste in us, and those incomplete cycles, our body needed to make sense of them. And so when it buried it said, wait a minute, I don't want to do this again. So we need to categorize this, and so that we avoid it. And that's
So I had an experience early on in marriage where it's very interesting. I had not thought about this until we actually started talking about it, but I was mad at my husband and I had like stewed on it all day long, and I get home from work and I'm ready, and I was like, you know what, Chris? I'm really upset that this thing happened, and I like gear up for the fight, and I'm like, I'm ready. Like, I've got the arguments, I've got it all laid out. Like, I know how to win this fight, number one, and like how to express my anger and frustration at it. And he goes, hold on one second, Sammy, let me stop you right there. I've been thinking about this too, and you are 100% right. I was completely out of line, and I should have never said or done that thing. I don't even remember what the thing was right now. I just remember there was a thing. I should have never done that. And you're absolutely right. And I am so, so sorry. Please forgive me, and I won't do it again. And I just remember catching myself, and I was like, oh, thank you. Okay. Appreciate it. But also, okay, great. And so I like sat there and it was like, can I still yell at you? Because I still have some feelings that I need to let out right now, that I needed to get to the other side of this cycle. And I needed to express this and let this out. And thank you so much for agreeing with me so quickly. Can you be my best friend for a second, and can I just like rant about my husband then instead? Like, I don't know. It was so interesting because I was like, I still had all of that feeling inside me that needed to get let out. And I mean, the best response that he immediately was like,
right.
yes, you're right. Of course. And you're like, oh, crap.
And that is exactly why we say emotion is energy in motion. You had all of that energy and it needed movement,
Yes.
but most of us, our only movement that we know about is yelling or, and so, yeah, having that, you got to let that energy out.
Which he was a good sport and let me yell at him more, even though he agreed with me. So it was probably one of the best times we've ever fought, though, because he got to sit and listen and be like, yeah, that does suck. I can't believe he would say that. Like in a way that like funny. A friend would, but it worked out really well.
You know what's funny is that one time I can remember Barry and I had and it's hopefully more than one time, but I can remember there was a day that we went for a walk after work, and I was like, I have this coworker and he really got on my nerves. But I've worked 2 other jobs since we've owned our business together. Well, and I often am on site with clients and things like that. So it's very common for me to kind of debrief my days. I can remember when I would leave, my jobs, and I would be like, oh my gosh. And I would just go and talk about my day and talk about the coworkers that drove me crazy. And it really was an opportunity for me to like get that energy out.
Mm-hmm.
So that day when he and I were walking, I'm like, can I tell you about my coworker? Since you're my husband, I love my husband and he's so sweet. And for those of you that don't know, we are in a family business, and the coworker I was talking about was my husband. And so we were able to create that separation though. And he was like, let me put on my hat the way I used to and pretend like I'm listening to you talk about somebody that you work with, and not be defensive that you're complaining about me. And he also liked it because then he got a little bit of insight into why it was frustrating for me. So I know that we've had that opportunity a couple of times. And I think one of the things I want to note is that both of us did something interesting, is that I said, can I talk to my husband about my coworker? And you said, can I talk to my best friend about my husband? And there's almost like it's just mind trickery. Like, I feel like some of the things that we teach in Traveling Light is just mind trickery. You know what I mean? But it's like, it lets us separate ourselves. Even when we're talking about my brain is doing this thing, it allows that separation for us to kind of see outside of ourselves. And so I think that's a really neat coping skill.
Yeah, Brene Brown talks about like the story in my head says that when you say this, it means this, which makes it, there's something about adding that little bit of gap that can create some safety. It doesn't feel quite as vulnerable and scary when you can push,
right, because it's not as
gap.
It's not as accusatory. It's not saying you are this thing. It's like, whoa, can we be united against my brain that is making up this story?
Right.
So my husband and myself are united, and our brains do weird things. And our brains make up weird stories, all in the name of protection. I would say so much of it is survival and protection.
And your brain has done such a good job of surviving up to this point. Anybody listening to this podcast has a 100% success rate at survival. If you're not having a 100% success rate at survival, then you're probably not around to listen to this podcast. So there you go.
Right. Yeah. Now the thing is that most of us want a little more from life than survival.
Right.
I think that's the key that I want to keep taking us back to. And maybe I keep hammering that drum because for me, I struggled with this concept of this served me or this served my husband. Like, this coping skill that I did worked for me in survival because I want somebody to take responsibility. I want somebody to be like, take some ownership that they were crappy to me. You know what I mean? And it took me a very, very, very long time to really appreciate that it is just our brain helping us survive, helping to protect us, and seeing that we set patterns at some point in our life that we're working. Like you were saying, the boss that is awful to you, and if you get into a pattern where you like over ingratiate yourself to them. Some people call it brown nosing, sucking up. I think official term is fawning. If you find yourself doing that, it's what you figured out that worked to survive. And then what happens is that sometimes our brain, because we want to be efficient, then it keeps going on that pattern because it worked once. And so we just keep doing it. And that's what this is about. This is about living consciously, living examined life so that you can get beyond survival and you can get to thriving and you can design and live the life that you want, not just living out a pattern.
Well, and I know that today's episode is not specifically about being kind to yourself. However, I would love to just take a little tangent to say, if it's not clear what we're saying, let me really make it explicit. Survival, your brain, your body, your responses, doing what it has done to survive is great. Like, you have survived, and we can be grateful to our body and to our brain for surviving, for enabling and building these patterns, this protection. That is all okay. And we can still choose to do something different. Angela, I think that, I don't know that you shared here, but I remember something that has been really impactful for me that you shared was you had a therapist who said, thank goodness that you
Oh,
poured layers of concrete around your heart to protect yourself.
yeah.
Because if you had not done that, your heart may not be intact here today. So, sure, we're going to do the hard work of taking a jackhammer to excavate, but having done that and having put layers of concrete to protect yourself, kept your heart whole way
Yeah.
down deep. That's something that's resonated with me a lot, is that whatever you have done and however things have happened to get you to this point, thank goodness, because you are here at this point. We can also continue to choose a different story and a different way to thrive. And you don't have to continue in a way that is just survival mode for the rest of your life. You have options. If you don't see the options around you or you don't see that path, A plus for listening to other people and seeking out other resources to just illuminate what a different path could be, because there's hope. There's hope that it can be better, and there's hope that it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be triggered by hairpin moments and really caught off guard by incomplete cycles that you've had buried from the past.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the incomplete cycle is a file in your brain that says, if we get anywhere near this type of situation, that's dangerous. And that's what causes that hairpin response, that triggered response. And so I think that to me, that's the hope of this work, is that as I've completed cycles and as I have allowed myself to listen to what my body believed was unsafe, and then as I can take my adult brain and my adult self and say, oh, wow, that was helpful when you were 9, but it's not actually helpful now. And I can make a new decision, which then allows me to not see that situation as dangerous. You know, if being left out is excruciatingly painful and very dangerous, then if you go to a networking event and you don't know somebody, that is horrifying, right? Because your body is like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever. But we've completed these cycles to where we just go, oh, okay, this is uncomfortable. I do like knowing somebody. I do like feeling comfortable and in my own skin, but it doesn't feel deadly. You know, it just can feel uncomfortable. And you really, that's the hope we want with completing cycles.
So, to give an example of an incomplete cycle, or ways that you can discover, because I think that there's a lot of, this episode's about discovering where your incomplete cycles are. I do think that there are a lot of different ways you might notice I have an
Yep.
incomplete cycle.
Yep.
One of the ways, I don't know that you actually specifically talk about this in your book, but that I have thought about, is that insecurity that probably about. You're like, oh, I'm really insecure about this thing. That probably has something to do with an incomplete cycle. And so for me, I pretty frequently growing up just had insecurities about being able to do enough. If you've been listening for a while, we also think that an enoughness is related to one of our 7 core beliefs about ourselves. But I, a boss could tell me this work product was not sufficient, and I'm immediately taken back to this childhood feeling that somehow or another I am not enough. And so then I'm crying because my boss at my previous corporate job said, "Hey Sammy, this work was not good enough and I know that you can do better, so you need to try again." And I'm just sobbing in the bathroom afterwards because my boss told me I'm not good enough, which is not what she said, and all of these things. Or, as I wrote about in Fast Company, I had a course that I was developing, and Angela was like, I mean, it's fine. And I'm just like crushed, like, oh my gosh, what do you mean it's fine? I'm just like crying. I'm a disappointment to you. I'm all of these things. When you have those big reactions to something that maybe in a different situation wouldn't elicit a big reaction, that's probably an indicator light of an incomplete cycle somewhere or another in that. That doesn't have to be an in the moment where you're like, while you're sitting there crying, like, this is an incomplete cycle and I have to address this. I would probably recommend it's in the reflection afterwards to be like, that seems like it might have been a bigger response than what the situation warranted. In those moments, I usually check in like, was I hungry? Was I tired? Were there hormones going on? Was there extra stress? Like, there's some different things to think about. And was this like, this is definitely a bigger issue for me, feeling like what I produce is enough. And so within that, how can I separate somebody's feedback from this internal insecurity, this unbelief that I am enough? That is important and hard work.
Yeah, that is absolutely a great indicator. Other indicators, you could literally have physical, visible symptoms that indicate a incomplete cycle. The one that I think about is the like hunched over feeling. I mean, like trying to make yourself smaller. And so, like we talk about being uncomfortable in your body, and if there's situations where you don't feel like you can stand up straight, put your shoulders back, but you feel like you have to hunch over, and that could be an indicator of a incomplete cycle. I know I've worked with at least one client where this was like, they stuttered in 7th grade and they got embarrassed. And so they just don't want to be seen is what we got down to. And there was, of course, one of the core beliefs tied to that. But even if you notice in certain scenarios, your posture changes, you're not able to look up and look out, or maybe is all the time, you're not able to make eye contact with people. Those are also some indicators.
I have had friends who talk about when they go home for like holidays, they go to their parents' house. There's almost a physical reaction when they walk through the door of their body changing and how they carry themselves. I think that's a huge, like right along with that. If there are places you go, people you interact with, that it feels like not uncontrollable as in you couldn't stop it, but it is just like the immediate, you catch yourself, you do this, and then you're like, wait, hold on. No, I got to loosen my shoulders and try to physically remind myself to let go and loosen up. If you are having to physically or mentally remind yourself to alter your physical state to a more relaxed place, that's probably incomplete cycle somewhere.
Yeah, and then the last one that I see people, well, I won't say the last one because we have an upcoming episode on psychosomatic pain, but the last one we'll talk about today as an indicator of incomplete cycles is really the feeling of stuckness when you set a goal. And that goal can be anything from, I want to walk every single day, or I want to get 10,000 steps, and you feel stuck that you can't get there, to you own a business and you've got set a revenue goal, whether you are in a corporate environment and you have set a goal to kind of move up the corporate ladder, but you continually feel like you're just hitting up against this wall. That can be an indicator, because when you have this feeling of, I don't have what it takes, I don't trust myself, I'm not lovable, your body is going to struggle hardcore to go into situations that are going to activate that fear. Also, you may notice your goal setting. I used to set goals to try to prove I have what it takes, to try to prove, and I'm air quoting for those of you listening, to try to prove that I am enough. And so if I reach this level of success, I talk about in our first book how I became a Mary Kay sales consultant, and then I went and earned a car in 12 months, but I still didn't feel good about myself. So I decided to go and set out to be a director. And 12 months later, the youngest director and the fastest to get there. And I still didn't feel good enough. I tried to use accomplishment to feel better about myself and to outrun these beliefs, and it will absolutely catch up to you. And eventually, if you can achieve that level of success, you will often then find yourself going, wait, now why do I still feel bad about myself? Or you may get really, really close and then not get there. And that can be due to self-sabotage. It can be due to law of attraction, like you're just not going to attract the right people, or you get there and you're miserable because you are just like you can't have happiness and you can't have success, because that would be it would actually be in conflict with the I'm not enough, or I don't have what it takes. And your brain's not going to let you live a lie. And if you believe you don't have what it takes, then no amount of accomplishment is going to make that true.
Sorry, I just really want you to say that one more time.
There is no amount of accomplishment that is going to make you feel successful, that is going to make you feel worthy, it's going to make you feel valuable or feel like you have enough. That is a core belief that you have to plant. You have to complete your cycles to get rid of the negative belief, and you have to get the core belief planted in your brain, planted in your body, because no accomplishment is going to make you feel anything that you want to feel.
I feel like we could end right there. Also, I mean, in the slightest note, it's a little bit depressing for those of us who are accomplishment seekers throughout their lives and want to do that. Like, what do you mean it's never going to work? What do you mean it's not going to happen? Just
and
because
it could happen temporarily.
Well, and just because that won't happen long term doesn't mean that there aren't other ways to get that feeling of satisfaction, that you are just fine and enough and perfect exactly as you are. You don't have to have achieved anything. And you can achieve things for the sake of achieving things and for completing excellent work, not for the sake of proving anything to anybody, yourself or to others or whatever.
Absolutely.
So now that we have a couple of different ways to identify what are incomplete cycles within us, what next? What do we do with it? What happens now? Great. We're in this state where we know something is wrong and needs to be addressed. Then what?
So to complete the cycles, what we would do is we would actually go through a process where we would activate your nervous system on purpose. What I like to do in coaching appointments, I've been called sadistic, but what I really like to do is put your body in an imagined scenario that is going to make it feel like it feels in the situation. So, like, for instance, I have several clients that are want to be a published author and want to speak about their book. And so I put them I use our imagination to say, okay, now let's imagine you've gotten a call from the Chamber of Commerce and they need you to speak tomorrow. And then we go through the different core beliefs and notice what the sensations are in your body. And we walk through that whole process of noticing sensations that will allow them to let that cycle complete. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to do kind of the introductory step of that process. And Sami, you're going to lead me through a body scan. And the reason why I love to do the body scan in coaching appointments is to show that the idea of completing cycles, the idea of noticing sensations in your body, isn't horrible. It's not this traumatic thing that you're going to be bawling your eyes out. Usually, I've had a couple of people that got pretty activated, but in general, it's going to be a pretty simple process. And so what I love to do is start with the body scan, just to be able to kind of dry run and in a very safe environment, teach you how to notice the sensations in your body.
Well, because I think that one of the messages just in general that keeps coming back up is that allow all the feelings.
Oh, wow.
There's not a bad feeling, a bad emotion, and when we in our brain label these things and stuff them down and say this isn't okay and I'm not going to feel this, I'm not going to let this thing happen, this feeling, sensation, or emotion. I say those all as three separate things. That's where we can end up with some of this buried toxic waste, this baggage, this other things, and finding a way to let yourself feel it. Let it happen, let it flow through you. Let the wave rise and fall all the way as it hits the shore. You'll be fine. You will survive. You
Mm.
will be okay. And it's probably going to be a little bit easier for you. You don't have to believe us. We just have had a lot of people who trust us and then end up finding out that it works and it's helping them. But you don't have to believe us technically. You could just continue on in your own ways thinking that feelings are bad and I don't want them. And maybe we can try it out. So I would actually love to invite everybody, not just Angela. I'm not just leading Angela in the body scan here. Wherever you are, wherever you're listening to this podcast, if you're in the car, you're washing dishes, you're on a walk, we're going to take a moment and we're going to tune in with exactly where we are and what we're doing right now. If you are doing something where you should not close your eyes, please don't close your eyes. But you can still notice and tune in to what's going on around you. So deep breath in, everybody. Deep breath out. All right. I want us to take a moment to turn our attention to your toes, not your feet, your toes. Wiggle all of your toes. Notice where they are. Notice how your feet are planted or hanging or loose. Where are your feet at in the world in reference to your body? Take your attention and move it up to your ankles. Notice if there's any stiffness, tightness, looseness. Think about your ankles. We're going to shift our attention up our calves. Notice the muscles to our knees. Notice anything within our knees. Does it feel uh, like it's a cracky feeling today? Does it feel like a rubber band? Does it feel overworked? Does it feel ready to go? Thinking about our knees and our body. We're going to move up from our knees, up our thighs, to our sits bones and our hips. Are you planted in a chair? Do you feel how secure you might be? Are you not? If you're standing, do you feel how your hips feel the hinge of your body? Really notice into your pelvis, into your hips, any looseness, tightness here. All right, we're going to continue up through our stomach. Notice our stomach and the emptiness or fullness it might have right now. Into our chest, into our heart and our ribs and our lungs. This cage right here in the center of our body. We're going to send our attention and our awareness down our arms. You can go down one arm first. Think about your elbow, your wrist, each of your fingers. Notice if your fingers are open or closed. You don't have to change it, or you can. We're going to jump to our other fingers on our other hand. Wiggle them around. Notice our other wrist, our elbow. And then we're going to go back up through our shoulders. And we're going to notice both shoulders and our back. Kind of follow a line of attention and awareness up to your neck. See if anything feels tight or loose. The tense, what's the tenseness there? We're going to continue up, and I like to go up over the back of my head. Notice the top of my head, and then down our face and our forehead, our eyes, our mouth, and our cheeks. Just taking it all in with no judgment, seeing where we're at. Angela, is there anywhere kind of in particular in your body where you notice a lot of tension or pulling or sensations?
Definitely always in my shoulders.
Okay. Let's tune in. Tune in to your shoulders. Tell us a little bit about what the sensation feels like. Is it tight? Is it loose? Is it pulling?
It feels tight.
Okay. Is there like a boundary to this tightness? Can you see sort of edges to it?
Yes.
Where are those edges at?
So if I like to start out at where my arms connect to my shoulders and kind of scan in, and I find that the tension is about 2 inches in from my whatever that little shoulder
Yeah. Connection is.
the connection to my arms. Yeah.
Is there any particular shape?
Yes, it feels like it is a rectangle, like probably about 2 inches tall, and then whatever that probably the size like of a ruler, like a
Just kind of
wide
across
ruler.
the back of your neck?
Yep.
Okay. We're just going to notice it. Just be aware of it. We're going to try to learn as much as we can just about what it looks like, feels like, smells like, is shaped like. Any texture to the sensation?
No.
Okay. Any color?
Nope.
Any temperature?
It feels warm, not super hot, but just warm.
Okay. We're going to imagine that this long ruler like rectangle on our back is just an exhibit at an art museum. It's just on a little display case here in the middle that we can walk all the way around. And we're just going to notice it, walk around it, see if we get really close. Do we notice anything different? If we step back really far, does it change?
Yeah, it gets wider. It actually went all the way out to the edge of right where the shoulders and the arm connect.
Okay. Are there any other changes to it? Did it get taller?
It feels like it got a little bit narrow. I mean, like shorter.
Okay. And is it a pulling, or is it a weight, or is it a um like a stretch? What is the action that this sort of is giving?
It sort of feels like there's a bar that is like attached to my body that keeps wanting to pull. Um, like like I am rounded and hunched, and it keeps wanting to like pull it straight.
Interesting.
Like because
Okay.
it's like really inflexible, the bar. So it's the ruler is rigid.
Okay. Would you say it's smooth?
I think so. I mean,
Okay.
doesn't
Well, okay. Let's keep walking around it. See if we get really, really close. Does anything change? Does it
Yeah,
feel more or less intense?
out on the edges, it's like it feels more intense and like almost like the center part feels starting to get more flexible, but then the outer edges feel like they're hotter, like there's tension on them, so it's having to use energy to kind of pull back.
Hmm.
And it's not hot in the middle anymore. Like the middle has cooled off, and now it's just hot on the outside edges.
Okay. So, can we take a moment to express some gratitude for our body for having sensations, for letting us know that we're alive, for feeling this pulling back and just existing here?
I think the heat gets just a little bit less when I try to be grateful.
Okay. Sometimes sensations in our body are there to give us a message or to tell us about something. When you lean in close, maybe hand this sensation a microphone or a pen and paper. Is there any message that comes up for you? Could be a word, an image, a quote, a song.
The little just phrase that's in my brain is stand tall and be yourself.
Hmm. How does that sit with you?
It makes sense with some of the situations I'm dealing with right now.
Yeah. Let's take a moment to express some gratitude for that, for this message, for our body trying to give us a reminder to stand tall and be ourselves, even if it is sent through a way that might be maybe a little bit uncomfortable in this tension and pulling back.
When I think about that, the heat gets lessened and the tension is lessened on my shoulders.
Okay.
It's still there, but it's not as intense. It almost feels tingly now, which in my experience, the tingly sensation, if it transitions after, it represents like my body doesn't really feel like I'm going to listen. And so it wants to keep that tingling there as a reminder. And it just doesn't feel as um, intense.
Okay. Well, thanks for participating in this exercise. To sort of round it out, though, I do want to do like 2 or 3 deep breaths wherever you are listening. And if you've been kind of following along with your own sensations and tensions, sometimes I find it helpful to like try to shake it out and kind of let loose and bring yourself back to the present. So we're going to take just 2 deep breaths together. Just in, 2, 3, 4, and then out. 2, 3, 4. One more. In, 2, 3, 4. Out. 2, 3, 4. Okay. And give it a little wiggle. Shake it all out. Roll your shoulders. Do whatever you need to do. Stretch your face. Wow. Angela, how was that? Feel free. You can rate my performance in a body scan.
You did well. You do it different than I do. I always make people travel up their back because I find that people hold a lot of sensations in like their lower back and their middle back and upper back. But I like how you did the notice your stomach and your heart and those
What's
things.
interesting
So,
is I have a lot of people who notice a lot of like gut anxiety issues and just like tightness in their heart. And so
well, yeah. And when we start working
interesting.
through the beliefs, I say most of the time, if there's a sensation around it, it starts in your throat, your heart, or your stomach. But for some
Hmm.
reason in the body scan, I think part of it in the body scan, I'm trying to keep people out of their the deep beliefs yet. And so I
Yeah.
like to keep them just because I'm trying to show them that it's not scary. But I have had people that just jump right in there and they're like, no, it's in my chest and in my heart area. So anyway, very good. Nice
I
job.
have also, one of the things recently for me that keeps coming up is I have a lot of things that show up in my throat. And I find myself checking in with my throat kind of a lot now. And it's been very interesting because I'll be like, oh my gosh, this feels like a tense or maybe scary situation. And I go to swallow to like feel it in my throat, and there's no feeling there. And I'm like, okay, sure. Yep. Okay, great. Well, let's keep moving.
Let's go.
Um, it's weird that this has definitively happened to me like 7 or 8 times in the past 3 or 4 weeks that I'm like, okay, checking in throat. How bad are we hurting? And it's like, nope, there's literally nothing. And even I've had like sick children, sick husband, been around sick people. So then it's like, I'll wake up in the morning, be like ready for the painful swallow in my throat, and there's nothing. And it's so, I'm in just this weird state of I've lived so much of my life with this sensation that just was a part of my everyday being, and now it's not. And I don't miss it. I'm noticing. I'm very aware that it is not there and that it doesn't have to be there. It's been cool.
That is cool. It is an adjustment because these negative beliefs also generate a lot of chatter in your head. And I say that's our inner critic, keeping us in line constantly. And so it is hard to get used to the reduced chatter. And it's like, this is quiet. And this is what I've been wanting my whole life. And yet still, it's so new that it's like, whoa, what's happening?
Right.
So I can relate.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you so much for joining us for sort of this exercise, and kind of the first time that we've led everybody here listening through one of these kind of mindfulness and body scan exercises. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, feel free to let us know whether you liked it or didn't like it. We would love to hear from you guys. You can always email us at podcast@befreakingawesome.com. That's the letter B, no E, freakingawesome.com. And I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week, and I hope you guys go be freaking awesome.